Alright, I am back with another build, and today we are finally returning to a long-running series of mine, the Deity build series. This series has been highly requested to make its return, as there are plenty of deities I have not yet covered in this game, as well as outside of this game and in the wider D&D lore, which is actually something we're going to be covering today. For the record, these builds were not made entirely on my own. I did these as part of a build theory crafting livestream, which I am going to be doing fairly frequently on the weekends. This weekend is going to be a slightly different stream because I've been invited to play Lethal Company with some other streamers. Speaking of which, I will be doing that this weekend. Saturday from 12 PM to 4 PM, I will be playing Lethal Company with Twitch streamer Red Dog and a few others. I have made a community post about it, and there's a scheduled stream up on the channel, so feel free to join in for that one. But the following weeks, if I'm not busy, my schedule's a bit weird at the moment, I should be able to do a few more build theory crafting streams like this. So if you want to be part of the kind of creation of these deity builds, feel free to catch those streams if you're able, because trust me, we have a lot of fun. I would actually go back. I would actually recommend going and watching the VOD for the stream that made these builds, like this one and the next two that I'll be doing, because it somehow ended up being the most off-the-rails funny thing I've ever been a part of. It was so fun. Chat just was going crazy that day. So anyways, I would seriously recommend checking that out. But regardless, let's get into what this build actually is. Now, this build is going to be a bit strange. We decided we definitely wanted to be because this is a build based around Umberlee, who is the kind of goddess of the sea, or also known as, like, the bench queen. Again, watch the stream. But basically, the idea of this was obviously to kind of use Umberlee's equipment that can be found in Act 3, alongside kind of making a build based around, you know, thunder, lightning, and I guess ice to an extent as well, to kind of get that, like, stormy ocean vibe. I've also gone ahead and built a blue dragonborn, and I've kind of gone for, like, a sea monster look here. I said this on stream, but it kind of reminds me of what are they called? Sahagons from, like, Final Fantasy, the, like, sea fishmen. And I don't know, I think this looks really, really cool and works really well for this character. But yes, the idea is that this is kind of a thunder, lightning, ice build based around Umberlee's equipment and, I guess, lore. I mean, overall, you know, Umberlee is kind of seen as an evil deity overall that people more or less try to appease rather than actually worship, aside from, you know, the temple that's in Baldur's Gate. So I felt like a blue dragonborn, which are naturally a bit more on the evil side, is appropriate. And yes, that means we do get a bit of lightning breath action as well. Anyways, let's get this build started, because again, this is a bit of a weird one. It's mainly a blaster caster, but we've got some interesting tech involving our equipment. So, we're going to be kicking things off as a fighter. This is going to allow us to get a fighting style, and I'm going with 2-weapon fighting. We are going to be dual wielding with this build, and it will make sense when you see why. As for our ability scores, yes, they are strange, but trust me when I say they work. 14 in Strength, Dex, and Constitution. That amount of Constitution is going to be fine for most of the game, even on Tactician. On a mode, maybe. But again, this is more of a spellcaster as well as a melee fighter as well. But we do get a lot of blaster spells with this, so, you know, not as big of a deal if we wanted to stay ranged. Dexterity at 14. Again, this is mainly because our armor class, as you can see, we're wearing clothing, so we need a bit more dexterity in order to kind of get that high AC, or at least decent AC. And strength at 14 because it is going to be our attacking stat for our weapons. I would like this to be higher, and honestly, if you are optimizing this build, I would use Potions of Hill Giant Strength here, or maybe use the Gloves of Dexterity to dump this and put more points into strength and other stuff. But because I don't really like using potions of Hill Giant Strength as part of my builds, I've kind of gone for a more even stat spread, but again, you can change this up however you like. And finally, Wisdom at 16, this is going to be our main spellcasting stat, so we need it. As for our proficiencies, I've gone for some interesting ones. Athletics we actually kind of need because we are going to be throwing with this build, because we're using a trident. I've gone with the Urchin background, which is going to give us sleight of hand and stealth. My kind of lore for this character is they may have been, like, as a dragonborn youngling, or whatever they're called. They might have been, like, kind of like a refugee of some kind. Maybe, I think maybe them and their family were maybe coming over and got shipwrecked, and ended up being picked up by maybe a priestess of Umberlee or something and was kind of raised there. I don't know, Valor's a bit iffy on this one, but you guys can kind of pick it up. But again, these builds are kind of meant to be like the chosen of a deity, so maybe Umberlee themselves saved them from the ocean, so you never know. You can kind of figure out the lore of this one yourself. And finally, Intimidation. Because the Bench Queen is evil, and so we're a little bit testy, and so Intimidation kind of makes sense. I don't know. Just build this however you like. Now, for the levels of this build, you can kind of take the levels in any order you like, but I do think that you're going to get a lot out of staying Fighter for the few levels that we do it, and then moving on to our main class afterwards. So I'm going to be showing that in that order, but it's entirely up to you. But at level 2 of Fighter, we are going to be getting Action Surge, which is going to allow us to immediately gain an extra action to use this turn. Everyone knows Action Surge. Very, very powerful on pretty much any build it's used on. Next up at Fighter level 3, we get to pick our subclass. And what possible subclass makes sense for a build like this? Well, Eldritch Knight. Now yes, we did dump intelligence, but hear me out. Eldritch Knight is going to give us a few things, namely the Weaponed Bond feature, allowing us to ritually bind a weapon in our main hand. The weapon can't be knocked out of our hands and automatically returns when thrown. Overall, this is going to help our build quite a lot, because it's going to actually give us the ability to use some unique synergy that we wouldn't otherwise be able to, so stick around for that. As for our cantrips, again, we did dump intelligence, so we don't really want anything too offensive. So I'm just going to pick Friends and Mage Hand for now, but again, if you wanted to play around with the items of this build, maybe pick up the Headband of Intelligence, Shocking Grasp and Ray of Frost would absolutely be welcome here. And as for our spells, we need Mage Armour, because again, we're going to be wearing clothing with this build in the endgame, so Mage Armour is going to allow us to gain a proper armour class from doing so. And finally, Shield, because it's a good spell. And finally, we do get to pick a spell from the expanded spell list, coming from Wizard here, and we have a lot of options, but my personal choice is going to be Ice Knife. Now, I know what you might be thinking, why Ice Knife? When we dump intelligence, this thing is never going to hit. Well, here's the thing. Basically, we're always going to be able to do a little bit of cold damage with this spell because the shards of ice still explode. And we're mainly using this for the ice surface that it creates, because we're going to be making water surfaces with this build, so we can automatically turn those into ice and have a lot of battlefield control. And then this build is going to be definitely be built around manipulating water, either being able to just use it as regular water to make enemies wet in order to make them vulnerable to cold and lightning attacks, be able to turn it into electrocuted water, inflicting that status condition, which we'll get to in a minute, or being able to turn the water frozen, causing enemies to slip and fall over. Basically, a lot of different ways to kind of manipulate the battlefield in a single build. Sorry, I just hiccuped. That was weird. I hope that doesn't prevail throughout the video. And at Fighter level 4, we're going to be getting our first feat, and we're going to need a pretty important one. We're going with Dual Wielder, because I want to dual wield versatile weapons with this build. Now yes, again, this is a bit of a weird choice, but trust me, when you see how this build shakes out in the end, it's going to work out. But basically, because now we can dual wield any weapon we like, we've kind of got extra attack that uses our bonus action, but nothing else as a fighter is really using our bonus action anyway, so we're basically getting 2 attacks per turn at level 4, which is really nice for us. Since we took 2 weapon fighting, that's not really a downside. We also do get another spell at this level, and honestly, there's not too much to pick here, but we can pick up Magic Missile, because even though our intelligence is low, this always hits no matter what, so it's a reliable source of range damage if we need it. And at Fighter level 5, we're not taking it. Now, you could take it and then respec later once you kind of have the optimal setup here, but again, I'm showing off the final build here, but you can kind of respec and play around with it as you go. But I wouldn't say I don't want extra attack on this build, don't get me wrong, extra attack is always nice to have, but this build is meant to be a caster first, a melee fighter second, so I'm not gunning for it here. What I really want is our first level in Cleric. Cleric is going to give us a ton of things like a subclass, and we're picking Tempest Domain. I mean, come on, it was pretty flippin' obvious. As soon as you saw Cleric, you knew exactly what was happening. Tempest Domain Cleric is going to give us a few really interesting things. We're going to get Thunderwave and Fog Cloud as Cleric spells, which is nice, but also Wrath of the Storm. As a reaction, strike back at an attacker, dealing 2 to 16 lightning damage or 2 to 16 thunder damage. The target takes half damage on a successful save. Pretty good overall, it's just a little bit of extra damage for our reaction, which we're not really using at this point. A nice level 1 feature. Honestly, a lot of builds that are kind of melee focused can actually benefit from taking a 1 level dip into Tempest Cleric. Probably not as useful as War Domain, but Tempest definitely has its benefits, especially if you're going for a certain theme. We also do get cantrips here, and let's go for our typical stuff. I kind of want Produce Flame here because it counts as a ranged spell attack, and that will be important later, rather than Sacred Flame, but however Resistance and Guidance we want anyway, and we already have friends, so Thaumaturgy isn't as useful. Now unfortunately, Umberlee is not a selectable deity for this game, which sucks. I mean, and since our theming is kind of lightning, Talus is a decent close second, but the fact that I think it's weird that you can't select Umberlee in this game, that feels very strange to me. As for our prepared spells, we can choose whatever we like, but the big one we want here is Create or Destroy Water, allowing us to create water surfaces that we can then manipulate with cold or lightning or whatever have you. Pretty good overall. I'm also going to be taking the healing spells here because we can do some standard cleric shtick, although I might drop Healing Word for now in favour of Guiding Bolt. Actually, we'll do this. Because Guiding Bolt, again, is another ranged spell attack, which we want. And finally, Sanctuary, because Sanctuary shenanigans. If you know, you know, the spell is awesome. Next up, at Cleric level 2, we are going to be getting our main subclass feature, Destructive Wrath. Whenever we roll thunder or lightning damage, you can use your channel divinity to deal maximum damage instead. By the time we've reached our max level here, we are going to get 2 channel divinity charges, meaning you can do this twice per long rest. Short rest! Ooh, spicy. So yes, we're going to be getting some big lightning or thunder damage out of this, which is awesome. We like that quite a lot. We also get to prepare an extra spell at this level, and the game has already chosen Cure Wounds for me, so that works for me. Water has healing properties. It makes sense. Surely. Right, as a level 3 Tempest Cleric, we're going to be getting some extra level 2 spells here. Shatter being a big old thunder spell, which we love, and Gust of Wind. We can also prepare some other spells, and I believe Aid, again, is a really powerful option for us here, but Hold Person, Spiritual Weapon, Silence Blindness, all this good shtick will work perfectly nicely, but Aid is obviously the most powerful overall for being kind of a team player. At Cleric level 4, we are going to be able to take a feat, and I want an ability score improvement to bump up our Wisdom. Now, this is because it's our main spellcasting stat. I definitely want this as high as it can go, but you know, you can kind of you can do strength as well if you like. If you care more about the weapon attacks, it's entirely up to you. As for our cantrips, we do get another one, so let's grab Sacred Flame, so we have another radiant damage option. And I think I'm actually going to take Hold Person here, because as I was kind of thinking about it a few seconds ago, Hold Person in like a water situation would be really cruel. Imagine you like created a bunch of water and the person's having to swim in it. And then you just cast Hold Person, paralyzing them, and then they just drown, unable to move. Jeez, that's terrifying. God's above. Yeah, let's move on. Sorry, one of my big fears is like drowning and thalassophobia. I don't like that thought now, but I've had it. Anyways, at level 5 of Tempest Cleric, we're going to get level 3 spells, including 2 from our domain. The big one here is Cool Lightning, giving us a big lightning attack. Lightning strikes all targets within range, then for 10 turns you can cool down lightning again without expending a spell slot. Of course, this takes our concentration to be able to do this, but this means we can just spam lightning left, right, and centre. If we've already made our enemies wet with a water surface, we're just getting double damage, double damage, double damage, and it's going to be great. Combine this with our Destructive Wrath feature, and well, they're cooked. We also get Sleet Storm though, which is a nice big ice storm that will let us create ice surfaces. And in fact, if you don't necessarily want to use Create or Destroy Water here, you can actually use Sleet Storm, then use Produce Flame to melt the ice, creating a water surface that way. There's a little bit of fun to be had here. And yeah, with that you can also use Produce Flame to melt any ice surface and make it water. Pretty awesome overall. Anyway, as for our extra spells, I want Mass Healing Word for big heals and Spirit Guardians because it's bloody Spirit Guardians. Every time I take Cleric, I'm taking Spirit Guardians because it's just that good. Next up, at Cleric level 6, we are going to get another subclass feature and another Charge of Channel Divinity, which is nice. And we're going to be getting Thunderbolt Strike as our subclass feature. Whenever you deal lightning or thunder damage to a creature that is larger or smaller, you can push it up to 3 meters. This is going to work very, very nicely with our ability to make electrocuted water surfaces, meaning that you know, you're going to be able to basically inflict that status condition over and over, causing your enemies to be knocked away, knocked prone, and they're going to have a hard time standing up, sometimes taking up their like movement and not being able to really reach you, which is really good. We do get an extra level 3 spell, and I'm going to pick Glyph of Warding because this can do thunder or lightning damage, so it fits. Next up, at Cleric level 7, we get access to level 4 spells, including 2 really awesome ones. Ice Storm is a big fuck-off ice attack, which is going to deal bludgeoning and cold damage and create a massive ice surface, which is awesome. And also freedom of movement. It snaps an ally out of stun, difficult terrain cannot slow them down, and they cannot be magically paralysed or restrained. One of the better just generic spells in the game, because you can kind of cast this at the start of a new day. It doesn't cost your concentration, so, you know, it's basically just a free buff for a level 4 spell slot. And since we already get that, we can kind of grab a different level 4 spell slot as well, as Spirit Guardian, or Guardian of Faith I should say, Death Ward, Banishment, pick whatever you like, it really doesn't matter. I'll go with Banishment. Get in the fucking ocean, I don't know. Wait, does Banishment change? Like, if you're a Cleric then there's Banishment. Does the place you send them to with Banishment change depending on your god's domain? Like, if you are worshipping a goddess of the sea in our cases, it just send them to, like, the water plane where it's just water and ocean. Oh, dude, that's actually a cool thought. Huh, that actually is cool. I don't know. Let me know if that's true. Anyway, as our final level of Tempest Cleric, we're going to be getting a few things, namely a feat, but also Divine Strike Thunder, meaning any weapon attack we do can have thunder damage added to it, which is awesome. Finally, we are going to be getting a feat here, and I'm going to be bumping up our Wisdom to 20. Again, this is more of a caster first, so I really want that high damage and high chances to hit. You may feel like Strength is a bit on the low side if you do plan on using the weapons a bit more in this build, in which case, pick up the Potion of Everlasting Vigor to give it a +2. Or again, use those potions to heal Giant Strength. It's entirely up to you. So yeah, I think that's pretty good. Pretty good. I forgot to prepare my level 5 spells like a dork. Hold on! We do get access to level... No, we don't. Level 4 spells. What am I thinking level 5 for? We didn't hit level 9. But we do have an extra spell slot, so... Death Ward. Yeah, there we go. That's what I was thinking of. Right. Anyways, that is the build. Overall, you're going to be getting a ton of battlefield control. You're going to get big damage by being able to use things like Cool Lightning, to be able to, after making enemies wet, to do big damage in conjunction with Destructive Wrath. You're going to be able to use weapons effectively thanks to Weapon Bond and obviously your fighter levels. You're going to have, like I say, a ton of battlefield control between electrocution surfaces and frozen surfaces. You're going to get big damage numbers from things like Divine Strike, Spirit Guardians, your spell attacks. You're going to have a good time. Overall, again, this build isn't exactly optimized because there were certain equipment and themes here I wanted to use, but if you changed up the equipment, maybe move the stats around, like I said, getting some stat boosting items, you could definitely turn this into a more powerful build. But I'm not about optimization here, I'm about fun, theming, and lore, and so I think what I've created here is pretty darn fun. But let's take a look at the equipment, because that's what matters. First up, this is a dual-wielding build, and Umberlee has 2 tridents in this game, so let's go over those first. First up is the Trident of the Waves. On a hit, a creature create a 2-meter water surface centered around the target. This weapon also does an additional 1d4 cold damage. It's a +1 weapon overall, which is a bit meh, but it does also get the unique ability to use Disarming Strike as well, once per short rest without needing a superiority die, so that's pretty cool. This is definitely Umberlee's main weapon. Again, it does cold damage, so it can help us with some ice-related stuff like that, and again, that will be doubled thanks to the wet status condition. But yeah, you're going to get a ton out of this weapon, and the big part is you can throw it if you bind it with Weapon Bond, and when it hits, it'll create that little water surface, meaning that you don't even need to use Create or Destroy Water on that enemy, because they'll already be wet, and then you can just go ham with whatever you want after that. So the idea is you throw this thing, make your enemy wet, and then cast a spell afterwards. Because, you know, you could. It's entirely... but you can kind of play this however you like. And in the offhand, we've got Alejandra's Whelm. This is a +2 weapon that also has an extra bit of cold damage. It's another Umberlee Trident, and it comes with a unique attack in Frigid Blade. You add your proficiency bonus as cold damage, in our case that's a +4, and when the attack hits, apply Frostbite. This creature takes 1 to 4 cold damage when making a weapon attack. So yeah, Frostbite, basically. And then Frostbite is whenever they take cold damage, they take an additional 1 cold damage per turn of Frostbite remaining. Now, the caveat is that obviously you cannot use this while it's in your offhand, because that's not how offhand weapons work, unfortunately. But what you can do is Weapon Bond Alejandra's Realm in your main hand, and then swap them round. So now that's in your main hand, and Alejandra's Realm is still bound in your offhand, so when you throw it, it will come back to you and will go in your offhand. So yeah, works pretty nicely. So then you could still get a use out of Frigid Blade. Our other weapon is the Darkfire Shortbow for obvious reasons. Haste, again, on any kind of cast build, is super strong, but it's going to help us with both making extra weapon attacks, like extra throws, and it's also going to help us, what do you call it? What am I thinking of? Make, yeah, extra spellcasts. My brain just went completely dead then. It's also a +2 ranged weapon, so we can use it for that if we want, and it gives us resistance to fire and cold damage, which is nice. Although you can't see it, because I'm standing in water right now, because I was like, hey, I need to get a thumbnail, so let's stand in water with the water character. Yeah, there you go. You can see now we have a few more resistances. Anyways, let's get into the actual... let me go over the alternate weapons options first, because unfortunately these are both Act 3 options, I believe, so a good Act 1 option in the meantime is the Sparkly Points. When the wearer deals damage using this weapon, they gain 2 lightning charges. It's a really good Act 1 kind of thing, and it also gets Disarming Strike? Damn, I did not know that. But basically what this is going to allow you to do is... when basically build up lightning charges, which for those of you that don't know, lightning charges allow you to deal an additional 1 lightning damage with each attack, and you have a +1 to attack rolls, but if you gain 5 charges, the next time you deal damage, you deal an additional 1d8. Basically, it's just a super nice buff, especially in the early game, and since it's a trident, it works quite nicely with our overall theming, and as such, I wholeheartedly recommend it. Another weapon you could use if you don't want to dual wield tridents and try something a little different, we have the Wave Mother's Sickle. Now what the Wave Mother's Sickle does is it looks absolutely badass when combined with a trident, but also it deals an extra 1d4 cold damage and has advantage against wet creatures. It's also one of the only sickles in the game to have a +2 weapon enchantment. Overall, I think it works out quite nicely for this build, but I do quite like the dual tridents more. I just figured I'd show it off. And finally, we have the Draconic Glaive. I would have a sorcerer in the party who can twin cast this buff, either just make a sorcerer hireling, and then put Draconic Elemental Weapon Ice or Lightning on both of the tridents at once. Basically just drop them both on the floor, have the sorcerer twin cast this on the weapons while they're on the floor, then pick them up, and you have an extra +1 to both weapons with the extra 1d4 of that elemental damage type of your choosing. Will definitely help this build's power overall. So, let's get into the actual equipment now. First up, we have the Cold Brim Hat. Once per turn, any condition inflicted on a target also applies 2 turns of Encrusted with Frost. Encrusted with Frost will mean the affected entity has disadvantage on dex saves. When there are 7 or more turns remaining, the entity must succeed a con save or take 1 to 4 cold damage and become frozen. The frozen status condition means the enemy is completely enameled in ice and is incapacitated. If they are dealt bludgeoning, thunder, or force damage, the ice shatters, ending the condition. So, overall, you basically just get to completely incapacitate an enemy if they become frozen. So, it builds up quite nicely. As we are, inflicting a lot of status conditions with this build, as you'll see in a minute. Obviously, there's Wet, which is an obvious one, but we have the opportunities to inflict a ton more, like Electrocuted. Let's keep going. We have the Thunderskin Cloak. When a creature with Reverberation deals damage to the wearer, the creature needs to make a con save or become dazed. So, if you don't know, Reverberation basically means the affected entity has a -1 penalty to physical saves per remaining turn, and when they have 5 or more turns, they take 1d4 thunder damage and possibly fall prone, which the condition is removed afterwards, but they kind of build up that reverb. And then Dazed means that they have disadvantage on wisdom saves, can't take reactions, and lose the dexterity bonus from their armor class. So overall, if an enemy attacks you while they are reverberating, they're going to take a big debuff. And how are we inflicting reverberate? Well, with the Spine Shudder Amulet. Whenever the wearer deals damage with a ranged spell attack, they inflict 2 turns of reverberation. This is the Thunder status condition, so we have an Ice status condition, a Lightning status condition, and a Thunder status condition, completing the trifecta of status conditions on this build. However, Reverberation is a little bit weaker on this build compared to some of my other Thunder and Lightning builds, so you might want to swap this out for something else, but it's entirely up to you. Next up is the Wave Mother's Robe. You gain resistance to fire and cold damage. The Dark Fire short bow gives us that anyway, but, you know, if you decide you don't want to use that bow on this character, then you still get those resistances. If the wearer is standing in a water surface at the start of their turn, this is the water surfaces either created by our weapon or by Create or Destroy Water. They heal 1d4 hit points, which is nice, it's a bit of survivability. We also get the ability to cast Create or Destroy Water once per short rest for free at 4th level, meaning the radius is huge. It says level 1 here, it is actually cast at the 4th level with this ability, meaning it's huge. In fact, I can show you. Yep, see? Level 4. And then, yeah, and then also it gives us a +1 to our armor class. So if we cast this in conjunction with Mage Armor, we have a total of 17 AC, which isn't great, but it's better than nothing. As for our gloves, yes, that's what those are called. We are using the Sparkle Hands. On a hit with an unarmed attack, the wearer gains 2 lightning charges. While imbued with lightning charges, attacks against metal constructs or foes wearing armor gain advantage. Now I know what you're thinking, but we're not a monk. We don't use unarmed attacks on this build. Well, remember when I said that thrown weapons are going to have a unique synergy in this build? Well, it applies here. For some reason, in regards to these gloves, thrown weapons count as an unarmed strike and will give you the lightning charges from this equipment. Some person in chat randomly pointed this out to me and I'm like, yeah, there's no way that works. Then I tested it, and it worked. I don't know why, it's clearly a bug, Larian will probably patch it out, in which case, you can instead use the Winter's Clutches. That means whenever you deal cold damage, you can inflict 2 turns of Encrusted with Frost, building that status condition up more, or you can use the Gloves of Dexterity instead to shift your stats around. It's entirely up to you. And then finally we have our boots, the Water Sparkers. I've always called them the Water Sparklers, but it's actually the Water Sparkers. I've always mispronounced that. Anyways. When the wearer stands under the water during combat, it becomes electrified. That's how we're getting that electrocuted status condition, super easy. If the wearer starts their turn on an electrified surface, they gain 3 lightning charges. So we're going to be really easily building that up pretty much every turn, constantly getting off that extra lightning damage. This works in conjunction with the Sparks Wall, meaning that we ourselves can't be electrocuted, because yes, if we make lightning surfaces on our own water surfaces, we would get electrocuted, which is, you know, kind of funny, but we don't want that to happen, so the Sparks Wall is going to help us out here. This also gives us resistance to lightning damage, so if you're not into the idea of playing a Dragonborn, but still want that lightning resistance in addition to the fire and cold because it's on theme, this is going to give you that anyway. I just wanted to play a Dragonborn because I wanted to make a cool sea monster, and I think it worked out. But, like, why is it sexy? Stupid, sexy sea monster. That was the worst Homer Simpson impression ever. Let's move on from this because it's getting weird. Finally, the Ring of Spiteful Thunder. When the wearer deals thunder damage to a reverberating creature, it becomes dazed unless it succeeds a con save. Basically, this just means that when we inflict reverberation, you know, we can cast Produce Flame, Guiding Bolt, Ice Knife to get that reverberation off. The Ring of Spiteful Thunder, in conjunction with the Reverberating Cloak, are basically going to be able to keep our enemies dazed for long periods of time, meaning they're going to be super stunned, because we can use things like Thunder Wave or Shatter to trigger this, or hell, even our Divine Strike Thunder will do this as well. And if you give the Thunder buff from the using the Drake for a Glaive to your weapons, you can trigger it that way too, so yay! Lots of status effects all around. Again, this build is great for battlefield control and shutting enemies down. So yeah, that is the build. You're going to see in the combat footage here that the build plays really uniquely. Again, you're throwing your tridents around, which again feels kind of on theme for like kind of a sea goddess type thing. And also, you're going to see the manipulation of the water surfaces, ice and cold and thunder and lightning and everything, just creating a ton of battlefield control. The enemies are basically stumbling all over themselves, and Fatboy Smell is now playing Power World. I don't know if that showed up on the video or not. It might have. I don't know. Hey Smell, how are you doing? You've made an unintentional cameo in a video. Even if people didn't see it, I've said your name. You're locked in now. You can't escape. You're a part of this. An unwilling participant in my game. Why am I like British Jigsaw? Anyways, I'm getting off topic. Like I said, this build has a ton of battlefield control, a ton of versatility, both melee and blaster damage, being able to throw weapons, deal dealing tons of damage with, you know, Divine Strike and all that. Again, you could adjust the levels of this build a bit if you maybe wanted to be a bit more melee focused, go for extra attack on fighter, change things around. Or hell, maybe you think this build is absolute crap and you want to keep the theme but change it completely. It's entirely up to you, but I actually really like what we came up with here because it is pretty damn powerful. Although again, it is going to work best as part of a team. I find that this build does do a lot of damage, but it has a lot of survivability, especially with the battlefield control, but it does take a while to whittle bigger enemies down, so you really want to use this to create opportunities for your other characters. Again, I test these builds solo, but most of them do work better as part of a party. But again, yeah, I think this build is super fun. It has a lot of manipulation. It's probably not as powerful as your typical Tempest Cleric Sorcerer combo where you're just spamming lightning bolts every 2 seconds, but you know, who cares? I love the theming of this build and the unique playstyle that it brings. So yeah, I think this is a good one, and I hope you all have enjoyed it. As for end of video stuff, I kind of actually did a lot of it at the start. Like I said, this was a Deity build created on a live stream involving the community. If you want to be involved in these things, keep an eye on your subscription feed for the scheduled streams coming up in the future, as well as the channel's community tab. I post stream announcements on there all the time. As for other stuff, you know, the channel's still doing really well. The subscriber count is still absolutely skyrocketing. In fact, I think we're going to hit 54,000 subscribers. Or 5,400. Sorry, not 54,000, Jesus Christ. 5,400 subscribers by, like, the time I finished recording this video. Yeah, we're like 8 subscribers away. The channel is climbing rapidly still. We've managed to get 1.4k in the past month, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. My previous... I mean, obviously the Reaper build did well, the Death build, but my previous 3 videos haven't done as well compared to that sort of content. But even though the initial kind of like view count is a bit lower, they're still kind of racking up views over the long term, so it's fine. And again, they're still doing really well. It's funny because an underperforming video for YouTube sucks, okay? Let me just say this. YouTube sucks because it's like, oh, this video is rated really lowly and people aren't really looking at it. It's not getting as much views as, you know, normal. But it's like performed better than most of the early videos on my channel. YouTube constantly shifts the goalpost of what is considered a good video. And even though I know like the community that I have is enjoying the content that I'm making and like the videos are good in and of themselves, YouTube tells me they're not, and it's hard to ignore the statistics sometimes. Don't get me wrong, I'm still just going to make whatever the hell I want. That Monster Tamer video that I made for Wednesday is one of my favourite builds I've ever made. It just introduced a awesome new playstyle to the game, a new way to play, and, you know, has a lot of really interesting synergy. People were pointing out how different summons synergize with different party members, like how Shovel the Quasit can turn invisible, giving Astari an advantage on sneak attacks, for example. Stuff like that. Like, I think it's a really cool video, and yet YouTube's like, nah, she was performing one by a long shot. And it's just like, but I don't care. It's great. So if people are just like, if like you see the lower performance of some of my newer videos, you just think, oh, well, that's, you know, I guess Hobo's running out of steam. No, I'm not. In fact, I'm kind of expecting these Deity builds to do a bit better, because a lot of people have been asking them to return, and I feel like the concept and like the visual of it is going to be really interesting. So, I don't know, this isn't really a bitch or a moan, or a binge, I should say. This is more just kind of like my observations of just why I think YouTube sucks. Just as a platform to work with, and why I'd never want this to be my full-time job. Like, you think, right, you think of a small YouTuber like me, who's dealing with this sort of thing, but you think about all the YouTubers that have been quitting lately, like MatPat, or, he was the big one. Who else kind of did it recently? I mean, there's been a bunch, right? I think it's just because, like, the constant expectation to churn out the same thing for basically the rest of your life until you completely burn out. And seeing these metrics and seeing these numbers and seeing which videos do worse and which do better, you get that rush of adrenaline when you see a video that's like your best performing one yet, and then you feel the kind of dread and the anxiety, especially if it's your full-time job, and like kind of a disappointment when a video performs really low. Now, someone like MatPat, right, who gets like 1 million views on a video on a bad day, like, and he has multiple channels and all that, he never has to worry about it. But as a fellow creative, and especially for someone like him who you can tell obviously puts a lot of thought and effort into what he makes most of the time, it must hurt to have something that you like so much do poorly in the public perception. And I didn't really understand that until I was on the other side of the coin, but now that I am, it's strange. Like, again, I'm never gonna be doing this for the fame or like money or like, you know, high subscriber counts. I mean, don't get me wrong, those things are nice to have because it kind of just makes me feel like, oh hey, people like what I do, and it kind of makes me feel better about myself in a way. But I can totally see how constantly fighting with algorithms and metrics and, you know, other, you know, crappy stuff that's decided by some big AI god that you can't really, or algorithmic god, I guess I should say. I don't think algorithms and AI are the same thing. Just having to constantly fight, like, the whims of a machine and public perception of you and what you create, I can see why that would suck. And I think, again, it's why I'm quite happy to have a small channel and have this as being a side thing, because if a video does poorly, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. The people who like my content and like me and, you know, like the video, even if they're not, like, an overall fan of the channel, are going to enjoy it, and that's what's important. And again, the way I've built my channel is I'm quite fortunate in my content that I create, is that it creates a backlog that people will go back to rather regularly if they're searching for specific concepts. And as such, and it always is nice when you kind of know you've made that one video that someone's going to look like is going to be looking for a very specific concept for a build very far down the line, and they'll find that video and they'll think it's just it's kind of its own little thing in the corner of the internet, stuff like that, you know. And I quite like having a channel that's basically a library of things that people can look back on. Because even my very first build on this channel, the Dante video, or the Devil Slayer, is still getting views to this day. It now has over 10k views, which for a first build ever made, like, which was made before I had any subscribers or anything like that, really, like, that video getting 1,000 views was incredible. It's now at 10k, despite being old and really poorly done, with no research, no nothing, and really poor, like, dialogue. Like, oh my god, I sounded like death in that video. I was just like, oh, hey guys, it's me. I got this build I made based on funny, wacky, woohoo pizza man. It's so bad. I'm definitely going to remaster that video as, like, my 100th video, which we're close to. Like, we're actually going to be at 100 build videos soon. That is insane. Like, how on earth have I done 100 of these? I apologise if you hear some weird noises. My headset's about to run out. I've just had to plug it in. Like, we're close to 100 videos. 100 builds. Okay, technically the channel already has 100 and something videos. But as far as builds go, this is going to be the 91st, I think? So we're less than 10 away from 100. And like I said, I think for my 100th video, I'm going to remaster the first one I ever did. Better equipment, better optimization, more faithful to the original source material. I'm going to go pretty crazy with it. I'm going to get pretty, I don't want to say smoking sexy, stylish with it, but, you know, that's Devil May Cry. I've been rambling a lot for this video, but people say they kind of like my rambly talks at the end of videos because it's better to have over the combat footage than just nothing. And this is a pretty long combat footage. I have no idea where it's actually at. Perhaps it's ended already, and I've just been kind of rambling over, like, this static image of Dragonborn woman. So, you know, perhaps I'll just end it here. Again, sorry for the kind of ramble, but it's interesting to kind of talk about these things every so often. So, but I will leave it here for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Praise the Bench Queen.